features a colorful collection of national currencies whose exchange rates rise and fall against each other. This results, economically speaking, in uncertainty.
Ja, dankjewel.
The European Community started in 1979 with the exchange rate mechanism of the European monetary system. Wim Duisenberg, president of the Central Dutch Bank.
But the agreement implies that countries make an effort, and a serious effort, to converge in their economic development, including inflation rates, so that exchange rates can remain stable.
But how do the central banks manage to keep interest rates on the different currencies stable?
Well, in effect, exchange rates are prices. It is the price of one currency expressed in terms of another currency. The price of money is interest. And the interest rates can be manipulated by central banks. And the other thing is the quantity. So central banks can manipulate both the price of money and the quantity of money traded into each other, that we call interventions in the exchange markets.
When inflation is beaten, and it will be, Britain will be stronger still.
Under Margaret Thatcher's leadership, the British government remained for years a strong opponent of participation in the ERM. Interest rates were raised in order to defend the pound. Inflation in England was 8% in 1990, with interest rates of 15%. Many homeowners were forced to sell their homes because of problems with these rates. Unemployment and bankruptcies rose dramatically. Margaret Thatcher gave in. Sir Alan Walters was Margaret Thatcher's advisor.
And the political pressure to go into the ERM was enormous. I don't think it was much to do with the ERM as such. It was more to do with personalities in the Conservative Party. But that's another matter.
The British government hoped that entering the ERM would help interest rates and inflation rates decrease. Karl Otto Pohl, former president of the Central German Bank.
I told John Major at that time, he called me and informed me that they wanted to join the ERM at 2.95. And I said, look, we have to negotiate that. This is not a unilateral decision. It needs two for tango, because we are on the other side. And he said, no, that is already decided, and the Prime Minister has decided. I said, well, that is not my Prime Minister, but we couldn't do anything because it was published in London. And so it was in the markets, and so we couldn't say, well, we think that's the wrong rate.
It was actually the rate at which the pound was being traded at that moment. So I wouldn't say it was the wrong rate. But and in that period and the ensuing years, particularly inflation and wage development in the United Kingdom were very much higher, although gradually less high, but very much higher than in the other countries of the European Community.
In the same month that the pound entered the ERM, the unification of Germany took place. The core country of the ERM started to push up its interest rates, forcing all members to follow. But keeping the pound unaltered in the ERM became a question of political prestige in London. In 1992, the finance ministers of the European Community met in the English city of Bath. Given the high inflation, Germany required England to devaluate the pound. England demanded Germany to decrease its interest rate. It didn't want to devaluate, neither to increase the interest rate. The financial markets, speculators, institutional investors and companies trying to hedge their risks alike started unprecedented speculation against the pound.
Fundamentally, they attack a currency by selling that currency and moving out of that currency. And that's not pure gnomes or speculators, very responsible companies, I always say, which operate internationally, have to see to it that the value of their cash tomorrow is at least the same as what it is today or over the weekend.
Speculation against the British pound reached billions. Speculators took advantage of the weakness of the ERM, that only a currency in crisis could be devalued. One such speculator was George Soros.
The money that I made on this particular transaction, the estimate is about $1 billion. You very simply use the forward market. You borrow a sterling and you sell the sterling that you have borrowed, you see, and then you buy back the sterling when the loan expires.
Well, the amounts that were required to keep the pound within the limits that had been agreed upon, so by buying up the pound, were so enormous that the authorities, in order to have the currencies with which to buy pounds available, had to borrow enormous amounts from other central banks, particularly in this case the Bundesbank. And then you're talking about tens and tens of billions of D-mark, which have to be borrowed, and that in the end that becomes unsustainable.
Finally, on the 16th of September 1992, the situation reached breaking point. England's Black Wednesday.
The government has concluded that Britain's best interests are served by suspending our membership of the exchange rate mechanism.
Question is a motion on the order paper. Mr. John Smith to move the amendment.
The real lesson, Madam Speaker, to be drawn from a comparison of the British and German economies is that before you can have a strong currency, you need a strong economy.
For the British taxpayer, the costs of the short-lived experiment with a fixed currency had been extremely expensive.